And welcome back. We today are going to make a new asset. So a lot of the times when we start working with different things, different medias, for example, if we're making an app or a video game, a lot of times we're going to be importing in different things. And we've done a whole bunch of different animations up to this point, but we're going to create a new one today. We're going to create a diamond. And for this, we're going to go at 64 by 64. Now, if you look and think about old school like pixel art video games, a lot of those are like 16 by 16 or maybe 8 by 8, 32 by 32. But one of the nice things is if you have a higher resolution image, it gives you the ability to adapt and scale things a lot nicer within your game engine because you have higher quality, because you have more pixels to work with. And we've seen this when we've done some of our things with scaling before. So we're going to go ahead and make a 64 by 64 image, even though effectively we're going to treat this as though we're going to end up using it maybe in our app as a 32 by 32. For our purposes today, we're going to do 64 by 64. And we're just going to make sure it's transparent and click create. Alright, and now we can go ahead and zoom that in. And you can see that we have our very familiar 64 by 64 canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my pencil tool. And I'm going to go ahead and use black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start making my image here. So let's go ahead and making sure my pixel size is set to 1. We're going to go ahead and let's go in about 3 pixels. It doesn't have to be precisely that, but we want to make sure that we're about 3 pixels in, so that looks pretty good there. And I'm going to do the same thing from the other side. So just to make sure I'm lined up, I'm going to hold down the shift key here. So it looks like I'm a little bit down, so I need to go up 1. And so now if I connect those with a straight line, you can see, of course, that they're in line. So, but I'm not going to worry about right now that they're going to be in line, because actually what I want to do is actually scale this up so I can get to the top. So I'm actually going to do this with 2 pixels each, and then just kind of stack them on top of each other. And I'm just going to repeat this process for both sides. Now, I could, of course, just go ahead and just copy and paste this and then transform it as we've done in the past as well. And so that might be what I say, you know, I'm going to go ahead and just do that because it might be easier rather than trying to go ahead and create a whole separate set of clicks here. But either way, however you choose to do it is up to you. So once you have all these pixels in place, the next step is going to be to go ahead and connect them because we have to make the top of our shape here. And so I just need one more set here, and if I connect across, there we go. We now have the top of our diamond that we're going to end up making here. So it's just going to be a nice little gem. Of course, you could make it a different shape by just simply recoloring it. So we're going to go kind of a bluish tone since we're doing a diamond. If you wanted to make something like a ruby, you could go more red. Emerald could be more green. And you, of course, you can change the shape and stuff like that as you go through. Alright, so here's the start of my diamond-like shape. And I'm actually going to go here now from this edge here. I'm going to go down 1 pixel closer to the edge. And let's go ahead and just bring this down a little bit. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. Just go ahead and bring it down. And I'm just going to test, make sure that is the same. Looks good. Alright. And now we want to, of course, bring this down to a point down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take from this point right here. Click and drag that down. Make sure it looks like I'm off just a little bit, but we can adjust that. There we go. And we'll do the same thing over here. Once we get that lined up, it shouldn't be too hard to go get a nice straight edge. Looks like I almost got it here, so I'm just going to go one more. There we go. And I can go ahead and connect this point here. And now we have the start to our shape. Now, of course, I can make this much more profound here. Like I could, for example, say, you know, I want this to be a little bit more pointed at the top as well. I could do that very easily. And then use my eraser tool to come in here and erase out some of these inner pieces here. So that way this looks a lot more of a point here shape. All right, so we have the start to our diamond. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I want to actually start adding some color in here. So first thing I'm going to do before I get too crazy with anything is let's go ahead and find that blue that we want to use. And I'm not going to go to a deep rich blue. I'm going to actually go a little bit lighter here for the diamond color, maybe right around here. And I'm going to go ahead and say that this blue tone right about here, you can pick your own tone to work with. That should be pretty good. And just to get started here, I'm just going to go ahead for now, go ahead and fill that whole shape in. Now, obviously, I'm not done with it yet. I still have much more that I can do. But we have obviously some work to do here. One of the things that we need to do is to kind of divide this into sections. So the way we're thinking about this is that we want this shape to be able to rotate and sparkle as it kind of animates itself in our app or our game. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, for now, let's go ahead and take this blue region. I'm just actually going to switch this back to being white here for a second. And let's just use our rectangular selection tool here just for a second. I'm just going to go ahead and do a rectangular selection inside of here, just so I can kind of see this is the center of my shape here. And let's go ahead and fill that in with white. And we're going to change that here in a second back. But let's just fill that in. So this is kind of the center of our shape. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect using Control D. And I'm going to use my eyedropper tool to go ahead and bring back that blue that I had before. So I'll just reset this, go back to blue. And what I can do now is I can again use that rectangular selection tool, and I want to kind of subdivide it so effectively these angle pieces here are their own section. So I'm going to go ahead and select this up to about right here. Looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and fill that back in with the blue using our paint bucket tool. But I don't want necessarily to be the same blue as what's right here, because this could be we can use different shades here. So we're actually going to take this blue here. I'm actually going to bring it a little more saturated, just a little bit here, just so I have a different color tone. Go ahead and fill it in. And that way, if I use my paint bucket tool, it's not going to necessarily bleed through these different regions. All right, Control D to deselect. Go back to my selection here. And let's go ahead and do this corner over here. Paint bucket tool. Looking great. Everything's coming along perfect. And now we want to go ahead and color some of these other zones here. So we need to have lighting and shading and all that other pieces going on. So in order for us to do that, let's go ahead and switch back to our selection tool here. And let's go ahead and grab the region that's above here. Now, if I try to use my rectangular selection tool, of course, you can see that it's going to grab everything here. But that's okay for now because we're not going to necessarily paint bucket that in. We're actually going to use our pencil tool to kind of fill this in. And what we want this to be here when we work with this rectangular selection here, when we work inside of this zone right here that we're working with, is we actually want this to be the area that is most away from our light source. So for example, if our light source is coming down right up here, in this region right here, and we talked about this previously, if the light source is coming from down here, that means our sparkle will be in this upper left corner, and the darkest region of this shape will be over here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do that darkest region first, because we're just going to go ahead and make this region right down here, we're going to fill that in with a black. Now we don't necessarily need a pure black here, so we're actually going to take that and actually just bring it up a little bit, just to kind of take a little bit of light back into it. And now we're going to use our brush tool and fill that area in. And again, that's not going to be the same black as what we have in our outline here. And so I'm just going to be very careful not to fill that outline in because I don't want that outline to be erased. There we go. But that, of course, is our shadow now. And this lesson, of course, will probably have some of our heaviest lifting in terms of what we're doing with this asset. And of course, if this is the darkest region, we can easily assume that this right here will be our so-called lightest region. And so again, I'm going to use my pencil tool here. Now, I want this to be closer to a white, but notice that this is a solid white. I want this to be more of a bluish white. So I'm actually going to use my eyedropper tool, grab that color, double click, and let's actually just drag that towards the white here. We want something pretty light. That looks pretty good there. And again, using my pencil tool, let's go ahead and fill that region in, being careful not to overwrite our border. And if we do, it's okay. We can just paint it back in. But the nice thing is about having this here, see, I can't go outside of my selection here. So this is kind of one of the nice things about putting one of these marquee selections here. Helps restrict where I'm painting. All right, going back to my rectangle marquee selection, now we can start targeting some of our other zones. So for example, I might say, you know, I want to target this zone here, and I can target this zone here, in order to make some other different selections of how this shape is going to come together. All right, so let's go ahead again, using that rectangular marquee selection tool. We know that if our light source is coming right here, this is going to be one of our brightest illuminated regions. This is the far side, so we expect that this would probably be a little darker. But this, of course, is going to also have its own kind of darkness because it's underneath the shape. But it is closer to the light source here. So we're, again, going to use our eyedropper tool. And let's go ahead and bring this down here in some shading here. We want to actually go pretty dark. That looks pretty good there. And again, using our pencil tool, let's go ahead and fill that in. All right, so I went ahead and filled that section in. Now let's repeat the process for our next corner. And you can see how everything is starting to come together here really nicely. So again, this is going to be a little bit of a lighter section here because again, our light source is kind of coming down from the top here. So we might say, you know what, let's go ahead and use this blue again, but let's take it up. We want a little bit lighter, but we don't want it too light. So let's do something that's maybe a little bit darker still, but we want lighter. That looks pretty good there. And let's go ahead and use our pencil tool to once again go ahead and fill this region that we have selected here in. Now if we say we don't want that color, maybe we want just a little bit darker, we can do that as well. And just so we have some color differentiation here between the other sectors of our asset. All right, and now that that's done, we of course have different regions here. Is there anything else that we can do to really help make this shape stand out? And if you're thinking about this shape is very non-animated looking because we kind of divide in these sections, the answer is yes. So we can do other things here to kind of help make this shape kind of pop out. And the reason why I did this way is because it helps us kind of visualize where the different sectors of this shape are going to belong. Now everything right now is divided into these really nice crisp areas here. But of course, as we know, when we did our previous Rainbow Gen, we of course had much more kind of effectively curved lines here, or things that were moving at an angle to our different locations. So for example, this shape right here, this line might actually come down at an angle right here to kind of more crop this corner out. But just for us to get these regions started, this worked out really well. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to give you a moment to think about how you can do that based upon our previous Rainbow Gen. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how I subdivided mine and see how we did. All right, and here is how I went ahead and applied my little bit of curvature to this shape. And of course, having those rectangular regions made it easy for me to go ahead and point from one area to another to go ahead and make these natural lines. Now, of course, you could add additional colors in here, and that's perfectly fine to do. But for our purpose today, let's just go ahead and keep it something relatively simple, just so that way we don't have to deal with additional colors and shading. Now again, you can add additional ones in here to really kind of add some different texture and color, and I encourage you to go ahead and do so. But even if you get to this point, this will be fine as we start moving forward into our next set of steps, where we really start adding that little bit of flavor, such as the sparkle and stuff like that.